Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into 3 true crime cases that are so incredibly twisted, you're gonna swear they were ripped straight from a Hollywood movie script. But I assure you, every single thing we are about to cover today is 100% real.
So what actually happens when human deception runs so deep that reality itself becomes, well, completely unreliable? We're going to look at aliases, anonymous stalkers, and imposters who manage to literally hijack the truth. Grab a notepad, folks, because the layers of deception we're peeling back today are absolutely staggering.
Part 1. The Sharon Marshall Mystery, the Setup and the Secrets.
Okay, let's start in 1986. Sharon was this brilliant high schooler who just snagged a full scholarship to Georgia Tech. But then, her life takes a really sharp, dark turn. Instead of heading off to college, she hides a pregnancy, gives up the baby, and moves across the country to Florida with a much older man named Frank Floyd. Fast forward to 1988, she has a son, Michael, while living with Frank. They eventually move to Tulsa, tie the knot in '89, and then, in 1990, Sharon tragically dies in a highly suspicious hit-and-run found unconscious right by the side of a highway.
Now, Frank, he was a notoriously aggressive guy, and the sheer danger Sharon was in is perfectly captured by a chilling threat he shouted during a fight at the Tulsa club where she worked as a dancer. He literally said, "If she ever left me, I'd kill her." It really underscores the profound terror she was living with right before she was killed, especially since she was reportedly making plans to finally pack up and leave him.
Things start to unravel when Frank tries to cash in on an $80,000 life insurance policy he took out on Sharon just months prior. To get the money, he was forced to use his real name, Frank Delano Floyd. Well, that completely exposed his massive criminal history, dating all the way back to a 1962 abduction conviction. This revelation sent him straight to prison, and he lost custody of young Michael, who went into foster care. But guys, the horror doesn't stop there. When Frank got out in 1994, he tracked Michael down and actually abducted him from his elementary school principal at gunpoint.
Frank was eventually tracked down and caught in Kentucky. But Michael, he had completely vanished. And Frank just stubbornly told the police it was none of their business where the boy was. But then, in 1995, a mechanic in Kansas buys a truck at an auction. It turns out to be a truck Frank had stolen and abandoned. Inside, authorities find a large envelope containing 97 horrifying photographs of a woman bound and beaten. These photos were ultimately matched to skeletal remains found down in Florida, identifying the victim as Sharon's former friend and co-worker, Cheryl Comesso.
But the sheer scale of this deception is what's truly mind-boggling, because buried among those 97 photos were older images of Frank abusing a young girl. When investigators finally identified her years later, it revealed the most disturbing twist yet. Sharon Marshall? That was a completely fabricated identity. She was actually Suzanne Marie Savarkis, the daughter of a woman Frank had briefly been married to back in the 1970s. So just to put this deeply disturbing reality into perspective, Frank kidnapped his own stepdaughter, Suzanne, as a young child. He raised her under a string of aliases, continuously abused her, eventually married her when she became an adult, and then, after her highly suspicious death, he kidnapped and murdered her young son, Michael. It is a generational cycle of abuse masked by aliases that investigators literally found too unbelievable to be real at first.
Moving on to Part 2, the French Crow murder. A family torn apart by paranoia.
So, picture this. 1980s France. The Villemin family seemed to have it all. A new home, a big promotion for the dad, Jean-Marie, and a bright baby boy named Gregory. But for 4 long years, they were mercilessly tormented by anonymous, threatening calls and letters from a stalker the French media dubbed the Crow. This nightmare culminated in one final, heart-wrenching letter that read, "I hope you die of grief, boss. Your money won't bring back your son. Here's my revenge." That exact letter was sent the very same day their 4-year-old son, Gregory, was found drowned and bound in the Villone River in 1984.
The investigation that followed completely fractured this family, turning them all against each other. Suspects bounced around in this chaotic web of pure paranoia. First, authorities pointed at Jean-Marie's cousin, Bernard LaRoche. When LaRoche was freed, a grief-stricken Jean-Marie actually tracked him down and murdered him in revenge. Then handwriting experts inexplicably pointed the finger at Gregory's own mother, Christine. She even went on a hunger strike while pregnant in prison before she was finally cleared. Decades later, in 2017, the investigation confusingly led to the arrests of Gregory's great-aunt and uncle.
This whole thing has remained tragically unsolved for decades. It even led to the suicide of the original magistrate who just couldn't bear the pressure of the failure. But in 2020, police reopened the case yet again, this time utilizing a fascinating piece of technology called stylometrics. Basically, by deeply analyzing the style, syntax, and punctuation in the crow's letters, investigators are hoping to finally name a new, highly anticipated suspect. It's an incredible example of how modern data analysis is finally catching up to decades-old secrets, hopefully bringing some closure to a true nightmare.
All right, part 3, the Texas imposter, the boy who came back different. Our final case takes us to San Antonio, Texas. In 1994, a troubled 13-year-old named Nicholas Barclay vanished after playing basketball. Now, because of his juvenile record, most people assumed he just ran away. But 3 years later, in '97, his family gets what seems like absolute miracle news. Authorities claim Nicholas has been found alive over in Spain, supposedly having escaped a horrific child trafficking ring. His older sister, Carrie, immediately hops on a plane to Europe to bring her little brother back home.
But you guys, this is where the story completely defies all logic. The boy who went missing was a 13-year-old American kid with blonde hair and blue eyes. The person Carrie brought back to Texas, a 23-year-old man with dark hair, brown eyes, and a super thick French accent. I mean, it was a sheer physical impossibility, and yet he was welcomed right into the Barclay home with open arms. To explain away these massive, glaring inconsistencies, the imposter offered up a truly bizarre excuse. He claimed his traffickers performed chemical experiments on him to alter his hair and eye color to hide his identity. He also said the trauma forced him to forget English, which is why he was only speaking French. And shockingly, the family eagerly bought it. They completely ignored all logical red flags and even told investigators to go ahead and close the case.
It wasn't until a suspicious private investigator, who was actually working with a documentary film crew at the time, noticed that the boy's ears didn't match Nicholas's old photos that the FBI finally got involved. Fingerprints and DNA proved the unthinkable. This guy was definitely not Nicholas. He was actually Frederic Pierre Bourdin, a notorious 23-year-old French conman known as the Chameleon, who had already assumed over 500 different identities across Europe.
But Frederick's true identity isn't even the darkest twist here. Frederick himself later stated that he was completely baffled by how easily the family took him in. He actually implied the Barclays were willingly playing along with his whole scheme. He claimed that when he first met Sister Carrie over in Spain, she was the one who fed him family knowledge and photos so he could pass the police tests. Crazy, right?
This actually brings a previously dismissed clue right back into the spotlight. 3 months after the real Nicholas vanished, his older brother Jason made a really strange, unverified 911 call, claiming Nicholas was breaking into their garage. Police showed up and found zero evidence of this. Investigators note that this specific type of false alarm is a really common tactic used by perpetrators to make it seem like a deceased victim is actually still alive and roaming around the neighborhood.
Which brings us to a deeply chilling theory shared by both the private investigator and Frederick himself. Did the family so willingly embrace a dark-haired 23-year-old French conman because Jason had already killed Nicholas? Was accepting this obvious imposter just their perfect alibi to permanently close a murder investigation? Sadly, Jason died of a drug overdose before police could properly investigate him, leaving this Texas case ice cold.
Part 4. Truth Stranger Than Fiction. The Lingering Questions.
From Frank Floyd's silent refusal on death row to ever explain the true circumstances of Sharon's death, to the anonymous French crow whose identity has eluded an entire nation for decades, to the missing Nicholas Barclay whose fate is completely lost to time and a family's secrets, these cases show us exactly how easily the truth can be buried beneath heavy, calculated layers of deception.
So I want to leave you with this provocative thought to chew on today. When reality is so expertly hijacked by manipulators, con men, and even our own families, is the absolute truth really out there waiting to be found? Or is the truth just whatever we ultimately choose to believe? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I will see you next time as we keep breaking down the most fascinating stories out there.